When setting a 3-year budget, most trusts acknowledge that years 2 and 3 can be a bit of a tick box exercise, but often there are some high-level assumptions on pay awards and funding, along with maybe some adjustments that have been maybe added in just to force a balanced budget. And these numbers will be completely rebuilt next year anyway, but we submit it because we have to. And the problem with that isn't just that the numbers aren't real. It's that challenges that we could have identified months earlier can end up being missed. So that multi-year view is the earliest warning system that we have. And if it's unreliable, it's then not warning you about anything. So when looking at multi-year budgets, one thing that they often have in common is identical figures have maybe been copied forward into future years, or maybe there's a blanket uplift that's been applied across every budget row. And often there are no assumptions recorded at all, which can mean that there's no audit trail as to, well, where did that budget number come from? On the other hand, some of the strongest 3-year budgets that we see are the exact opposite. So every significant budget line has a note against it explaining what it was based on. And then when you've got that detail, senior leaders and trustees can actually begin to interrogate the figures, which in turn means that you've got far more confidence in that future year budget. So one of the most common patterns that we see in trusts is those overly pessimistic assumptions. So costs might be set to rise far faster than funding year on year. I know when I worked in a central finance team that my instinct was always to be cautious, but eventually by being cautious, it can almost become unrealistic. So it can create a false picture that can then skew the conversations that you are having today. So as an example, one thing that often gets forgotten is that staff churn. So budgets assume that the staffing structure stays static, meaning that staff will continue to climb up the pay scale. But in reality, staff turnover means that some of that progression will likely be offset by your new starters. So there's a balance to be had between making sure that your multi-year budget has enough substance to be genuinely useful without turning it into this huge manual exercise. So if we think about it split up, year 1 is our working budget. So everything in here has been intentionally reviewed, we've appropriately costed it. Year 2, it's then important to focus on, well, what do we actually know? So do we have any confirmed restructuring costs and staffing changes? And are there any contract renewals that we need to reflect? And what conversations are taking place in the sector around pay awards? And once we've got all that information, we can then lock it into the budget and then flag everything else clearly as modelled assumptions. Then in year 3, we need to think about keeping it directional. So we're not trying to predict the future in detail, but we're just trying to gain an understanding of the trajectory. So the goal isn't a document that perfectly balances. It's a document that you and your trustees can reasonably rely on. And it's one that's been scrutinised enough to support those strategic decisions. And it's not just something that we submit and then forget about. So once trusts are at that stage, the 3-year budget stops being something that you're nervous about presenting, and it starts being something that actually shapes the conversations that you're having.